hard act to follow. I'm going to talk about something a little more internal facing, and that is the culture change. Part of the culture change that's going on here in INCOSE has to do with product development. So I'm going to spend a little time on that. So I need a little bit of culture change, and in order to do that, I need a little bit of your help. A lot of times in our working groups and in our initiatives and our objectives, we actually create some product with our colleagues. The product might be a document or a guideline or a set of data, a model. And often, unfortunately, it ends up on someone's hard disk or in the website, and you can't find it, and this kind of thing. So one of the things that we tried to develop as an objective from the board of directors back in 2015 was something called the products objective. And this objective is this is the vision that we have for 2020, is to produce and broker the most impactful systems engineering in the world. And I thought that was a really great idea. So what the board saw that excitement in my eyes, they said, great, you're going to be the champion of that. So I was honored to do it, but it's actually quite a lofty goal. But I think we're up to it. So that's probably what you're asking. Hey, we're probably already there, right? Well, to be truthful, what I did was a little bit of a treasure hunt. So that was the very first thing we started doing. We started looking in those hard disks and looking on the website. We all knew that we had these treasures all around because we've been on the working groups the last 10, 15, 20 years doing this stuff. We just can't find it. So our hypothesis was that if we went out and found all of these treasures, we could have a treasure trove of great products. And so unfortunately, a lot of them were old, but some of them were quite good and relevant today. But out of about 220 or so treasures, about 10 were suitable almost as is, just a little bit of a tweak was needed, and we were able to either publish them for free on YouTube or put them in the bookstore and this kind of thing. It went very quickly, and maybe another 5 or so needed a bit of effort, a little bit of a rework, but it was worth it. But the rest really seemed to be not acceptable somehow, and there were all different reasons why. So let's ask the question, why? So I kind of went through the list and I tried to categorize the reasons why when we were reviewing these. Came up with several different things. IP wasn't cleared, or we just wouldn't have the rights to do anything with it. Sometimes the branding was actually from a company that owned the rights to the work. The topic may have only been very locally relevant. So in some cases it was product that was identified as treasure, but it was a treasure for a chapter. It was about their chapter meeting that they had on September 2010, and how good it was, So it was interesting, but it wasn't a long-living document. Sometimes it just was too old. It might reference old standards that have been retired or obsoleted. Sometimes it became clear after we did some technical reviews with SMEs that there was a large understanding that it hadn't been reviewed before, so it needed a lot of rework in order to make it accurate. And sometimes it was for a very niche thing that really was good for, let's say, that working group, but it wasn't more widely interesting to the rest of the SE community. So there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just very narrow. And unfortunately, some weren't even systems engineering. So that happens. That happens. But I'm going to try to ask why. So I looked into it some more, and basically, I think what happens here is that in those cases, not all the time, sometimes there weren't plans, sometimes there was just one significant contributor, and so on. There were no customer needs, et cetera, no verification and validation. And so I'm going to, sound like I'm doing the 5 whys, but, what I thought was ironic was that, hey, these these were actually really experienced systems engineers. Why? Let's think about that. When I think about that, and this is probably just the most likely list, and by the way, I'm guilty of this too. I dug up some of my stuff and it wasn't accepted. I have more passion than I do time. I'm a volunteer worker. This is a volunteer workforce. I mean, it's not a business. I can't fire somebody who's not getting on board, right? And then, you know, people come and go. I mean, some people have the passion and then they change jobs and their boss says, I'm not going to send you to these conferences anymore. It just happens. Your team dissolves. Like you might have a working team that's working on a product and suddenly your main contributors are gone. And then you're left holding this kind of half-done thing that you're passionate about. What do you do with it? So some of the stuff was actually half-done. That makes sense. Anyway, it's hard to know also when you're in an organization like this where people are coming and going, even the leadership is coming and going, who are the stakeholders? And what are the processes that were expected of us? And I have a hard time finding stuff in Connect just like the rest of you guys. So I think all of that has to do with the reasons why. So what can we do about these kinds of root causes? And I really thought about it because what I want to do is turn all of that passion and effort into successful products that we can share with the greater SE community. I think about, what do we have, 17,000 members or so? Is that all the systems engineers in the world? Probably not. It would be great to really reach out to the rest of them and get them involved in what we're doing too. So what I'm trying to do in Tech Ops is make the product development resources really obvious and available and intuitive. And that's going to take a little while. We're working on it. But that's my goal. I would love for a person that only has some time at the IW and maybe once a month phone call to be able to come in, know exactly how to produce a product here, and not have to spend more than 5 minutes, you know, to figure that out. But that's not the case right now. I can't even find the work that I did in 2010, right? So we need to work on that. And I've been working with Bill Choen to try to come up with a way that we can do that. And it may take some time for us to make that semi-automated or at least very obvious. But the other thing is, you know, apply a little bit more systems engineering to the stuff that we do. So this is going to be a fast training session. So plan, right, before we develop, and that'll help us avoid volunteer wasting of time. That's the thing I'm really trying to avoid. I have a couple of use cases or case studies this year where a passionate member came to us with a, I don't know, 200 or 400-page document and said, I'm done, this is a product that's ready to go, right? And so we have a small committee that gets together and looks at this stuff, and we looked at it and we said, oh, wow, that's a lot of effort. And it took us a while to review it, and we found out, oh, there's an IP problem here. We really should have actually got clearance from these folks that you've copied all this stuff from before you did this. And there was a big pause in the room just like that, you know. So we spent a lot of time revising stuff, and it was a lot of effort, and we got it eventually out. But and there's several other use cases like that. What I want to do is try to make our internal resources available to you developers so that you're not stuck like that. You don't get to the end of a development cycle and say, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know how to even check that. So we have resources internally to do that. That's why a plan is important. And what about stakeholders? Well, all of us have some kind of organizational awareness, I hope, but if you don't, find out. There's someone in the organization that represents you, like an assistant director or a director here in the organization, and those people can help be conduits to your stakeholders. And internally in INCOSE, we actually have business stakeholders, believe it or not, and we also have, and those people are like the board of directors, and those folks, they are concerned about, INCOSE values and principles and following the INCOSE mission. And so there's a bit of a business check on things. But there's also customer representatives here too. The CAB, the Corporate Advisory Board, represents many of our industry members, also the Academic Council. So Those people that are in leadership roles within the organization are your conduit in order to get access to those stakeholders to find out what are their needs, what are their requirements, so that you have a better chance of making something that you're passionate about into something that actually is going to be very valuable to the organization and the greater system engineering community. The last part of this suggestion here is, because we're an all-volunteer organization, you really have to be careful about the way you do product management, program management, and project management, right? Sorry, I know there's 7 other different ways to say it. The point is, just assume that people may be gone tomorrow. So if you have a giant project, it's really the best practice is to break it down into tiny little bite-sized pieces and then allow people to help with that. If they're gone, it's not such a big loss because they might be gone tomorrow. But it's almost like crowdsourcing, you know? A little bit different, but almost. Anyway, I spent a little time, as if you saw the opening plenary, trying to define some common terminology. A lot of people say, well, what is an INCOSE product? So I think that's kind of important. This is part of the culture change, is to try to get our taxonomy on our vision in the right way. And so we have a policy now that basically says, okay, look, an INCOSE product is something that is INCOSE branded, and it's sufficiently reviewed by INCOSE for content and principles and quality, cleared for intellectual property, and branded and all of that kind of stuff. And either INCOSE owns the copyright or the author owns the copyright and has given INCOSE permission to use. And that's probably not a big surprise. But one of the things here is that we believe that a product is, it doesn't matter if we're going to give it away or sell it. The idea is it's a product if we make it and we give it to other people to digest. So if we're going to make something and give it to other people to digest, then it's a product. If we're going to sell it, it's also a product. So the idea of whether it's sold or for free doesn't necessarily mean it's not a product or is a product. And then we do want to recognize, though, that there's product that comes, SE product, that we want to broker. Remember the mission. We want to broker and create. But SE product that we want to broker comes from non-INCOSE affiliates, but also individual members, and also chapters, too. So the chapter products shouldn't be regulated, let's say, or overseen by Central. Right? A lot of chapters are very independent. They have their own MOU, they run their own finances and stuff like that, so we don't want to get involved in that. So if a chapter comes to us and says, we want to put a product on the Central INCOSE bookstore, we want to be able to say, great, we have a place for it right here. And it's a chapter product. One of the things that we struggled with a little bit was, oh, darn, does that mean we need to review it in the process that INCOSE Central has? No. The answer is no. The chapter already has their own process for reviewing and ensuring quality. Thank you. The other thing is we tried to come up with a very tailored and simple 3-phase approach to the product development. The idea is there's an upfront stage. We happen to call it product initiation. There's development, and then there's maintenance. And then there's little check boxes that we have in here with a couple of possible milestones having to do with planning and replanning and reviewing, with iterations, of course. And then if there's a significant content update, then we just ask for a plan update. But since we're planning on planning before we develop, I just wanted to add a couple of more points. Things like eliciting requirements from stakeholders and also including the budget and timeline, thinking, how are you going to do V&V? Is it a model? So how are you going to validate the model? That kind of stuff. That's all still important, right? We don't want to dictate how you do that. We just want to say, did you plan for it? What are you going to do? So anyway, during the transition, we formed a committee to fast-track products through the process. We recognize this is a culture change, so we're not going to suddenly say, you have to do it this way right now, starting now, right? Because there's lots of product development here in process that's already started, it's already in action. We don't want to stop that at all. In fact, we want to encourage it. So we formed a committee that's made up of different people from the organization that represent different parts of the process. And so what our goal is by 2019, essentially step back away from the committee, and hopefully we'll have that infrastructure in place that allows you to kind of just run through the process yourself very easily in an intuitive fashion. I put my email here because I'm the chair of the committee, and feel free to contact me if you have any products in mind, or you need help with planning, or you have something right in the middle of development that you'd like to get into our queue so that we could help shepherd along. Well, that's it. That's all I have, and hopefully you have lots of questions.